During the French Revolution, there was a very influential person with a tremendous amount of political power over Europe. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769. Napoleon came through the military ranks during the French Revolution and quickly gained political power over much of Europe. On December 2, 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France in the coronation of Napoleon. Once Napoleon took power over France, he created a European powerhouse of an empire that took down a slew of countries in wars that would be known as the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon was brutal when it came to war and struck terror into the European countries that he faced. Napoleon conquered much of Europe until the fateful day he was decimated in the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. In 1798, Napoleon led a military fleet of 400 ships and 54,000 men and took his treacherous journey into the Ottoman territories of Egypt and Syria. In doing so, he felt the need to stress the defense of French trade. This was a catapult into the France political limelight, and he was able to become first consul of the Republic. This received mass amounts of public approval and was a sign of greater things to come as he became the self-proclaimed first leader of the French. Whilst in Egypt, Napoleon had learned that France was losing several wars and was rapidly losing political power. After forming an alliance with some of France's top political figures, he overthrew the Directory and became first consul. Once returning from Egypt, Napoleon almost immediately returned to war with northern Italy after crossing the Swiss Alps. Napoleon was able to conquer most of Italy and send the Austrians to the negotiating table en route to winning the war. Napoleon was told to lead the French army into northern Italy to try to conquer Lombardy. Napoleon's increasing activity in northern Italy ended the War of the First Coalition. His army was massive in a way that the Kingdom of France provided him with nearly 200,000 soldiers. In 1812, Bonaparte also invaded Russia in a war called the Second Polish War to gain more political power and to support his actions. The Russian army was a force to be reckoned with nearly 680,000 soldiers. It was one of the largest military campaigns that Napoleon went up against. Through a tremendous amount of marches, Bonaparte pushed the Russian army back through Western Europe. Napoleon won a major battle, Smolensk, in hope that it would end his march into Russia, but it didn't. The Russian army continued to retreat throughout Russia. Bonaparte and his armies destroyed Smolensk and burned all the buildings to the ground. He left it with nothing but ashes and pushed on after the Russian army. The French army was told to burn crops and villages in Russia. The Russian military retreated for 3 months until they cornered themselves on a hillside in Moscow, where Napoleon and his military had the most brutal war of the Napoleonic Wars, as there were nearly 70,000 casualties on both sides. The French gained a victory over them that day. In the following weeks, Napoleon went back to Moscow to meet with the Russian emperor to get a for-sure victory, only to find that all of the Russians in Moscow had left. He pushed his army after them. When he eventually caught up to them, they went straight into battle. With Napoleon's troops weak from the cold, snowy winter, the Russians were able to overcome them in an upsetting defeat that greatly weakened Napoleon's political statuses and power in Europe. Napoleon was eventually overthrown for good in a traumatic upset in the Battle of Waterloo, where the 7th Coalition of British led army under the master of Duke Wellington completely outskilled and outclassed Napoleon's feeble army. Napoleon's reign had basically ended that day. He did try, but failed, to become leader once again in his 100-day campaign, but that had also ended in blunder. On his death day, May 5, 1821, he was revered as France's most dominant ruler to that date. Napoleon showed one of the most dominant and skilled runs of leadership in all of history, but whether he was a good leader or not is for you to decide.